Good day, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Just Fish Outdoors. I'm your host, Dale York, and I designed Just Fish Outdoors to focus on freshwater lakes and streams and to provide information, tips, and techniques, along with how-to segments for catching everything from crappie to catfish. We will also provide tips on equipment, tackle, boating, and much, much more. All of this is aimed at helping you catch more fish and have fun doing it. So join us each week as we talk about my favorite subject, fishing. That'll bring us to our special segment. I received a request to give some tips on wintertime catfish fishing, and so me and my brother put together a show, and like I said, I brought along my brother Brian, and we're going to throw out some tips for wintertime catfishing. And I guess really the first thing we need to talk about is, the first thing you're going to need to do is find active feeding fish. And for this, you've got to have good quality electronics on your boat if you're fishing out of a boat. The Lowrance HDS series is, in my humble opinion, the best units on the market, and so look at these. It'd be a perfect time if you didn't get what you wanted for Christmas. You might want to treat yourself to one of these new HDS units. Lowrance is coming out with a new line. They've lowered the price points on some units, and there's really no better time than to equip your boat right now with some of this great electronics, and I guarantee you the Lowrance HDS stuff will help you catch more fish. So, that's the first tip we're going to throw out there. And the next thing we're going to talk about is where you're going to look for these active feeding fish. And, the first thing that comes to mind, we have a lot of people this time of year that fish the rivers. One of the main things you're going to do in these rivers is you're going to look for the deeper holes in the main river channels. You're going to look for feeder creek channels that intersect the main river channel. Easily find these deeper river channels. They're up against the rock banks, up against the sheer banks, and generally that's where your deeper holes are going to be, and that's where your catfish are going to more or less try to conjure up this time of year. So what else comes to mind, Brian? Anything else when we're looking in these rivers and these channels?
Oh, yeah. You always want to look for any kind of structure within that hole, a big boulder, a log, anything like that provides some type of a current break or cover break for these fish. Most of the fish that you're going to find that are active this time of year are going to be blue cats. You will catch a few channels. You may catch a flathead once in a great while. But by far, most of your active catfish during the colder weather time are going to be blue cats, and these fish will actively pursue shad and stuff in these rivers. And they're like anything else, like any other fish. They'll get on a piece of structure or right behind it or whatever, and use it for an ambush point. So use it, when you get in these big deep holes or whatever, look for what I call the spot within the spot. You look for a big boulder, a log, or something laying down there on the bottom, and I can just about guarantee you there'll be fish around it somewhere. Yeah,
and a lot of it depends on, like you said, Brian, how much current's coming through the river as well. If there's not much current, the catfish will still tend to look for some kind of break in that current. They may be on the inside of a river bend in a hole. Like you said, they may be behind a big boulder. They may be behind a big brush pile, something of that nature. The more water they're running, the more these fish will move around. The more current you have in the river, sometimes when they're releasing a lot of water out of some of our hydro dams, and we have a lot of current in our big rivers, it'll belly these fish plumb out of the middle of the river. They'll tend to get up closer to the bank, maybe in shallower water, and find more of a current break because they will not want to fight that current. And that's pretty much holds true for any species of fish.
Oh, definitely. And it just about holds true almost year round.
Yeah.
Even in springtime when you get these big water releases and stuff, these fish, yes, they do travel, but they won't travel the middle of that river and fight that current. Those fish will seek out what I call the current breaks or the seams. And they'll come up the bank, so to speak. They're basically what I call eddy hopping. They'll pull in behind a spot and they'll rest for a little bit, and then they'll travel for a little ways and they'll pull into another spot. Of course, in the springtime, those fish, they're moving, feeding, thinking about spawning and all this good stuff. So the natural tendency is to, go upstream. But even this time of year when the water's cold and everything, if we get a big rain, which sometimes happens,
Yeah.
These fish will, they will try to get out of that current, and where you might have been catching fish out of 20, 25 foot of water in a river hole one weekend, you might catch them out of 5 to 7 foot of water the next weekend if they got a bunch of water coming down the river.
Yeah, they'll flush out of the middle of that river instead of fighting that current.
Yes.
And like you said, they'll get up real next to the bank and find that sweet spot where they don't have to expend a lot of energy to sit there. It really, it fluctuates fish in the rivers much more than it does the lakes. That'll give you an indication of where you want to start looking in the rivers. The next thing we'll talk about is finding fish in our area lakes. Basically, they're going to be around the main river channels this time of year. You're looking for intersections of feeder creeks coming into the main river channel. You're looking for ends of a sharp or deep point, perhaps. You may be looking also at channel ledges close to shallower flats where, in a couple of 3 warm days or warmer days, them fish will travel up out of that real deep water and get on the edge of that creek channel on that shallower flat. And, of course, the first time we get a weather change, they'll just drop right back in that deep hole. What other places come to mind, Brian?
Well, those channel ledges next to those flats, that is probably, in my opinion, probably just about the best almost year-round catfish structure there is in any lake. For, there's multiple reasons. You got those shallow flats. That's where the bait fish are going to be. That fish, he can travel a very short distance and be in deep water. Deep water, to any large fish, regardless of what it is security. So, he can travel up out off that ledge, get up on the edge of that flat, feed, make 10 tail beats and be right back home again.
Yeah.
That is probably going to be my number one place that I'm going to look. It depends on the weather.
Wind,
Wind and all this good stuff. And 2, whether or not they're releasing water out of the dam.
Yeah, and how much they're releasing.
If they release enough water out of some of these dams that we have, it will create current in those riverbeds in the lake. It will be a slight current, but it will be current. And a lot of times that'll trigger them fish.
Yeah, or it'll relocate them.
Right.
You may find a school of fish, and that's one thing that you will notice this time of year. If you're using some of this great HDS Lowrance equipment, you'll find that these fish tend to school up tighter, and they seem to be a little more locked down, meaning it takes something major to change their location. Like, for instance, you may find a school of fish and be catching a school of fish, and then all of a sudden the lake you're fishing, they start generating water, start throwing a lot of water out of the dam. And like Brian says, it creates that current coming through there, and that may relocate that whole school of fish.
Oh, definitely. They could drop to back. The first thing I would do is, if they're not there where they have been for the past week, look for the nearest sizable piece of structure. A lot of times those fish, they'll fall back. They'll get in a bend or get behind an outcrop or something, and they're just like fish in the river below the dam. They get out of the current.
Yeah, exactly. And depending on the weather, wind will relocate these fish as well. Wind blows the plankton in toward the bank, and the bait fish follow the plankton. That's their food source. And guess what? The game fish are going to follow the shad to a certain extent. So even in the wintertime, the old adage, find the bait, you find the fish, still holds true. It can just be a myriad of locations, but by and large, most of the catfish you're going to catch, even this time of year, the smaller ones, the 1 to 5 pound, or what I call the table food.
Yes.
The table fare fish are going to be deeper. They're going to be deeper than what you're going to find them in the spring or in the fall, or especially in the summer. So as a general rule, you're going to be fishing deeper. Take that in consideration. Boy, the next topic we're going to talk about is bait. And, I am no catfish expert extraordinaire by any stretch of the imagination. I grew up with my dad and my brother doing it, and they just gravitated toward it more than I did. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, in my experience, and I've caught blues up to 40 pounds. which is a respectable size fish.
Yeah, it's basically about all you want to play tag with around a boat. I can tell you that.
Yeah, especially in running water.
Especially in running water.
But based on my experience, I have to say that you just can't beat fresh shad. I think fresh bait is the key when you're fishing for any game fish. If you're bait fishing, fresh bait is the key. And I just don't think you can beat fresh shad for any of these species that we're talking about, whether you're talking about blues, channels, flatheads. What's your thoughts on that, Brian?
I wholeheartedly 125% agree. Folks, fresh shad, I mean, basically that's where it's at. Especially if you're targeting these bigger fish. If you're targeting fish 20 pounds and up, fresh bait is, especially shad, definitely, as far as I'm concerned, the number one offering that you can lob out there to them.
Yeah, I think you'll be hard pressed. You can catch smaller fish, in the 1 to 2 pound class, especially channels, on a myriad of baits. Punch bait is very popular.
Oh yeah.
You can look that up on the internet. There's several manufacturers. Some of the prepackaged baits are very user friendly. Fresh cut shad is a little messier, and then you have to make an effort to catch these shad, and this time of year, that's not so easy. But it can be done, and if you're really, really wanting to enhance your capabilities and your percentage of catching catfish this time of year, then I think you've got to learn how to locate shad this time of year, and you've got to perfect the technique of catching the shad this time of year.
Yeah, one thing that I could recommend, that little 3.5, 4 foot throw net that you may use in the spring and the summer. This time of year, I would hardly recommend going to as big a net as you can handle, especially out of a boat.
And as heavy of a net that you can handle.
This time of year, I prefer the non-woven straight nylon nets. They're heavier, they sink faster, and if you have to, here's another tip for you guys. Add about another 10 or 15 foot of rope onto the end of that throw net rope.
Yeah. Because
a lot of times these shad are going to be 15, 20 foot deep this time of year. You go over them with electronics, you throw that net out behind the boat. Well, if you got 15 foot of rope, you're not going to reach them.
Yeah, something's going to short. You're going to come up short every time.
It's going to close up on you before you get to them. So, it's a good idea to add some rope to that puppy and to let it sink down there. And you get adept at it. You can actually feel those shad in that net.
Yeah.
When that net goes over them, and then you can close it up. And
yeah. The bottom line is, if you're going to catfish fish this time of year, you really want to catch fish, you've got to get out there and do the work and catch the shad in order to be able to catch the fish on a regular basis. It's just that simple.
Oh yeah.
It's just that simple.
You have to be able to put out the effort and put out the time.
So the next thing we're going to talk about rigs. And, there's really, there's a myriad of them, but we're going to talk about the two most basic that will probably handle 90% of the situations that you may come across. The first one I'm going to talk about is the bass fishermen call it the Carolina rig. All the bait fishermen call it a slip sinker rig. And, it just consists of a sinker sliding up and down on your main line with a barrel swivel below that, and tied to the other end of the barrel swivel is a heavier leader line with your hook and bait of choice. It's a pretty simple rig. The next rig is called the Sandy Cooper rig, and Brian, you might want to explain that one.
Yeah, this is one that isn't used a whole lot because a lot of people basically on this side of the Mississippi don't know about it. What it involves is a foam peg float that you put above your hook, between your hook and your sinker. What this does is when you throw it out there and it goes down, that little old foam float actually will get that bait up off the bottom. And it'll make a little bit bigger scent trail in the water because you'll cover a little bit more of a water column with that bait as that scent comes off that bait. And especially if you're fishing in a lake, it has somewhat of a really, really mucky bottom, or if it has grass on the bottom and stuff like it. This is a really good way to get that bait up off the bottom and to be visible to the fish.
Yeah, and something to remember here, folks, is pay attention to your electronics when you're grafting and marking these fish and marking these waypoints, because there's the old wives' tale that catfish are only bottom feeders, and that is not true.
Oh, no.
Catfish will be all over the water column just depending on what's going on that particular day. You can catch them up shallow, you can catch them in the middle of the water column, you can catch them on the bottom. So, sometimes just by altering the leader length on this Sandy Cooper rig, you'll catch more fish than you will if you just thrown it out there and the bait was actually on bottom. So keep that in mind. The next thing we're going to talk about is hooks. And there's a couple, 3 different ways to go here that seem to be the predominant hooks of choice. There's a Daiichi Circle Chunk Light or a Team Catfish double action circle hook. So we're talking about 2 different circle hooks, and depending on what size bait you're throwing after, what size fish you're going after, you can use anything from a 3 or 4/0 circle hook all the way up to a 7, 8, or 9/0 circle hook. It just depends on the size of fish and size of bait you're going after. One thing, the best tip for a circle hook when you're using cut bait is keep the bend of the hook open. You just want to barely surface hook your bait and not hook it in the bend of the hook. And my brother Brian, he kind of has a little different take on this. Brian, explain your hook of choice.
Well, my hook of choice is a different style of hook, offset bend hook. It's called a kale hook. This is a hook that I've used for years and has had great success with it, catfish fishing. Now, unlike your circle hooks, with your circle hooks, when that fish bites and he starts easing off, you do not set the hook with a circle hook. All you basically do is let that fish get good and tight with it and start winding it in. I mean, that's about it right there. With the kale hooks, you have to do the old let the fish back up, get turned around, and, set the hook with these hooks. But I've had great success with these hooks. I've never had one broken. I've never had one bent out. I've caught fish that push 60 pounds on these things, and that they are the hook of my choice as far as catfish fishing, especially in the springtime when these fish are active and they're strong and everything. This is the hook that I like to use. It's good, it's strong, it's stout, and pretty readily available. You can just about find them anywhere.
Next item that you'll need about a 1/0 barrel swivel. You can use brass, you can use chrome, you can use black. You can use next thing is a 1 to 3 ounce sinker. Just depends on when and where you're drifting or anchored. These sinkers are called egg. If you're fishing, they're kind of a round looking thing or look like a chicken egg. Or no roll sinker if you're anchor fishing. I mean, if you're setting up and you're fishing the edge of a flat and you don't want that bait to move once you throw it out there, a flat or a no-roll sinker is the sinker of choice. The next thing you're going to need to do is you really need to use a heavier leader line to go into the hook than what the line is to your rod. These fish have very abrasive, small rows of teeth in their mouth, and if you use too light of a line on that hook, they can actually fray that line and cut you off. I mean, it can really be a miserable day that way. The next thing that I like to use when I'm fishing for catfish is I like a high visibility line. I like something I can see a long ways away that I have a lot of visibility to. Catfish, people think they have bad eyesight, but they don't. They have very good eyesight, but for whatever reason, they don't seem to be line shy or hook shy or leader shy. It doesn't seem to affect them. So you can get away fishing the high visibility line when some other game fish that you may be seeking, you can't get away with that. The next thing that I would highly recommend is stay away from the real high dollar graphite rods. I would really recommend an E-glass or an S-glass type rod. You really need a good parabolic action, and graphite rods don't really produce the action that's preferred that you need when you're going after these big fish. The next item I would recommend is a bait cast reel. Stay away from the spinning reels. You're looking for a bait caster with a higher line capacity, a great drag system, and if you're using a Cahill hook like Brian was talking about, that bait clicker access on that's available on some of these Catfish reels and other manufacturers' reels is a great asset. So think about that as well when you're rigging up for these things.
Yeah, especially in the middle of the night when you're bank fishing, you got multiple rods out. You're kind of running a dark bank there, and that's what you're listening for. You're waiting for that alarm clock to go off.
Yeah, and the one thing you don't want to hear is splash.
Yeah, that's the last thing you want to hear is tick, 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 splash.
Yeah, rattle, splash.
You don't want that.
You definitely want the rod to... You definitely don't want to be minus a rod and chasing that thing down through the bank. The next thing you're going to need, if you're boat fishing, is you're going to need rod holders. So if you're fishing circle hooks, you got it in a rod holder. You don't need to have the bait click on. You just need to not worry about it. So because with a circle hook, you're just going to pick the rod up once the fish takes off with it, and you're going to start whining. You're not going to have to set the hook. 2 techniques we'll talk about real quickly. One is drift fishing. It is one of the techniques that's used most often this time of year. You can cover a lot of water, but remember, on drift fishing, speed kills. So you want to drift around a half mile per hour. The other technique is anchor, and you'll need 2 anchors when you do this, folks. You'll need to anchor both ends of the boat. So remember this when you're trying to anchor up on these fish. You'll need 2 anchors, one in the front, one in the boat.
Yeah, you definitely want to try to keep that boat as still as possible for bite detections.
Yeah, exactly. Because some of the bites may be very, very aggressive. Some of the bites may be very, very light.
Definitely.
So you may not get that rod bending action. So you want to pay attention to that. Any other things come to mind, Brian?
Well, other than the fact of finding these fish, shad being probably the number one bait for this time of year, and just use some common sense. Remember to keep it safe if you're out there on the water this time of year. That water's cold, and you definitely don't want to wind up in it.
That's very, very true. The number one thing is dress in layers. Dress for the worst and peel for the best.
That's it.
So you might want to think about that. Brian, thanks for being on the show today. I've hoped we've helped some people with the catfish tips for the wintertime fishing. And folks, remember that the catfishing can really, really be hot for big fish this time of year. So if you get the opportunity to get out on the lake and try some of these techniques, and I guarantee you're going to improve your chances of catching a big fish or just catching catfish in general. They can be caught in multiples this time of year with no problem if you just do a little homework. And so try these tips out, and I think they'll help you out. Brian, thanks for coming on the show today, and I hope we've helped some folks gear up and catch these whiskered critters. Folks, send us an email. Tell us how you like the show or how we can improve on it. If you have a suggestion for a topic, let us know, and we'll try to put a show together for you that'll help you out. If you have a suggested topic, we'll try to put a show together for you. If you'd like know more about Just Fish Outdoors or anything we can help with, just drop us a line, justfishoutdoors@justfish.com, or you can also find us on our Facebook page at Just Fish Outdoors. Folks, get out and enjoy one of the many lakes or streams we're blessed to have, and be sure and catch us next week. This is Dale York, host of Just Fish Outdoors, saying we'll catch you later.